Oh, this is going to be a good one. Chinese AI pioneer questions OpenAI's sustainability. It's not sustainable.
I mean, it's
Well, its sustainability is going to depend on banning all Chinese AI.
perfect timing because you've just launched an enterprise large language model that's also going to be deploying DeepSeek more broadly. But talk us through exactly what it entails.
Yeah, well, I think China had its ChatGPT moment when DeepSeek came out. We can call it DeepSeek moment. Everyone's aware of it over the Chinese holidays. Everyone's talking about it, and the CEOs came back to work saying, put DeepSeek to work at my company." And what they found out was DeepSeek is a fantastic model, amazing AI, but it doesn't have the middleware and the user interface that it takes to connect to corporate databases, to build applications, to make it useful for HR, finance, and customer service. So what 01.ai did was we saw DeepSeek has been making great momentum, and we decided to really bet on DeepSeek and build that missing middleware and UI so that DeepSeek can be made useful in corporations. That's the product we announced this Monday, and we're getting fantastic reception in China and also in Hong Kong.
Tell us more about that launch.
Yeah, so we launched on Monday,
Yeah.
and what we talked about was many of you have DeepSeek now. You love to use it. In fact, one CEO friend of mine asked his employees, "What do you use it for?" And
Good question.
And the answer was fortune telling. By the way, that's a great thing to try for you. but it's not very deep into the industry, the company. You know, every company has ERP and the CRM databases. They have employee records. They have their internal information. And they want the model to be more a generalist. They want it to be knowledgeable. Bloomberg would want a finance knowledgeable model, right? Ping An would want an insurance knowledgeable model. So our job is to really build that layer for that purpose. It's sort of like if I gave you a Windows kernel that is the core operating system, you wouldn't know what to do with it. You need all the Windows layer, the application interfaces, so that the Windows kernel can be useful. And we like to think that 01.ai is providing that layer for DeepSeek, which is the underlying model and technology.
And using DeepSeek as the underlying model, I mean, obviously you could have chosen other models instead, including from the US. What does that tell you about where the competition or the I guess the race for supremacy stands between China and the United States right now?
Well, clearly in both US and China, the pre-training of a giant model has consolidated and is consolidating. And it's become clear that open source will be the winner. There's still many that will not concede. Right, OpenAI, Anthropic, who build their businesses believing they can build a better closed model than everyone else. I think they got shocked when they saw a model as good. They would argue nearly as good, but either way, they're getting it for much, much lower cost. If you think about OpenAI's cost of $7 billion of operating costs in 2024, DeepSeek probably operated with 2% the operating expense. So the issue really isn't whose model is 1% better. I think they're all very good. But the issue is OpenAI's model even sustainable, right? I mean, you're spending $7 billion a year, making a massive loss, and here you have a competitor coming in with an open source model that's for free. And that company also is infinitely lasting because this founder has enough money to fund it at the current level and has reduced the cost of computing by a factor of 5 to 10. So with that kind of formidable competitor, I think Sam Altman is probably not sleeping well.
Yeah, well, you do think, I mean, obviously, that DeepSeek would have really challenged some of the monetization strategies around AI, but at the same time,
Yeah, I mean, for my chatbot, I'm just waiting for some time on my hands to try to incorporate DeepSeek into it. Currently, I use OpenAI's APIs, but I'm getting more time on my hands, so it's going to be fun playing around with DeepSeek or maybe something even better. I mean, that's if nothing else comes along. I mean, it's a fun chatbot. I had fun with it, but yeah, again, I predicted this scenario. I predicted that there would be something If you want, I mean, I have a friend who's an ex-Googler, and for a few years now, I was telling him because he was trying to get me initially to use the Google Cloud, and I said, dude, it's way too expensive. So I bought like an RTX 3090 in the middle of COVID when it was like super pricey, and my 1080 just wasn't cutting it for AI stuff. And I used that. I used two of those actually in tandem to serve my chatbot at home using the earlier versions of GPT. Um, and then with OpenAI, they made it so it wasn't a monthly cost, it was a token based cost, which was quite reasonable. And initially, it was I wanted to make it available for free, but I'm not a software engineer, so the work required in order to protect those APIs. So my API got hacked like almost instantaneously. So I just shifted the chatbot over um, to allowing people to use their own API keys. But I mean, if something like DeepSeek is completely free, where the whole, you know, the whole purpose or idea of hacking your API key is kind of pointless. Then I can just throw in a DeepSeek API key, redirect to DeepSeek, and then just keep it free. And the reason why I made my chatbot was because just healthcare in the U.S. So many things in the U.S. have not met up with the promise of the future of American technology and neoliberalism that was sold to everyone at the end of the last century. And so, yeah, I wanted to make these mental health toolkits available just to allow people to chat. Like I had this experience myself. You wake up in the middle of the night, my mom passed away. I just want to chat to something. And so I got into chatbots before they were cool, before ChatGPT. I got into chatbots when it was considered taboo and like embarrassing, the same way that online dating was when it was still embarrassing before the whole coffee meets bagel and just the normalization of it all. But yeah, in terms of the model, I mean, someone's got to pay for something. So who's paying DeepSeek? And that's the real model going on over here is Chinese government definitely subsidizing and being willing to keep DeepSeek going and providing these, I guess, state-funded VC grants or state-supported versus OpenAI. That's, it's sort of like Linux versus Windows or Apple, right? I mean, people are, it's nice to have something open source, but if it's not your day job, if you don't get paid, if it doesn't put a roof over your head and food in your mouth, you can't really dedicate your entire life and convince other people to dedicate their lives to it. So open source is a nice idea, but I mean, surely software engineers must realize that there needs to be a business model to pay them, unless you're able to shift the entire system to universal basic income. With UBI, then you can have open source. So let's see what this guy has to say.
Given that AI is so commoditized now, and in China as well,
and the way things are currently going, I mean, there's a much higher probability of China launching UBI on a national scale. I just don't see it. I don't see it happening in the U.S. I just don't. I mean, the corruption in politics in the U.S. is so entrenched, and the cult of positivity, the cult of neoliberalism is so entrenched. I do not see how they're going to move on to universal basic income over here. But then again, the U.S. has a track record of somehow doing the impossible. They somehow managed to rope in the tobacco industry and other things as well. You did have the trust breaking of Teddy Roosevelt back in the day, and so the U.S. does have a track record of making these changes that no one ever expected them to make. So let's see.
open source approach. How many AI models do you think that the Chinese market can actually sustain?
Well, I think probably, I'm guessing three, DeepSeek, Alibaba, and ByteDance. And they'll evolve over time, right?
Okay, there's a few names missing on that list.
Yeah,
Only three.
well, there will be many other who aspire to build one,
Right.
and we'll see if there's a fourth player. But even within these three, I think DeepSeek currently has the momentum, and that's why we're embracing that.
Well, I mean, I don't know what his portfolio is, but I mean, he's Sinovation Ventures chairman. You asked him a leading question, so he's going to protect his portfolio as much as he can.
But I also want to point out that I wouldn't say AI is commoditized. I would say the underlying pioneer model, foundation model, that is trained with a huge amount of money is commoditized. It costs a lot, and it's hard to really compete with open source. But AI is not commoditized, right? It's like, Windows kernel, Linux kernel, that's kind of commoditized. But Windows is not commoditized. Microsoft makes a ton of money. And what 01.AI wants to do is build Windows and use DeepSeek as our Windows kernel.
And is that where you think the value added comes now?
It's a good analogy. It's a good analogy.
In other words, for VCs thinking about where the value added is in this industry, it's no longer, for example, AI, for example, still presents that value. And I want to understand, for example, the economics and why you think, say, there's only room for three as well.
Well, there may be room for four, but in most markets, you end up with room only for two, right? The winner who makes a ton of money, the runner-up who breaks even, and everyone else who dies. And this one is exacerbated because it's hard to monetize the underlying pioneer model. But once you're the winner, there are many ways to monetize it.
Right.
So that's the trick. For the VCs in both US and China are moving away from wanting to fund more pioneer models. They're happy to fund AI infrastructure, AI applications, consumer apps, because every app will be remade, right? And also enterprise apps that can provide real value add to enterprises. So AI funding is going gangbusters. It's
The only way that the US can compete right now, I think, as far as I can see, in order to take away the manufacturing edge that China has. So China has a manufacturing edge, it has an education edge, it has a R&D edge right now. So essentially just across the board. Is for manufacturing, the US really needs to dig deep and use robotics. So manufacture robotics over here or get good deals on robots in order to create factories that create factories. So once you have robots that can create other robots, then you get to a stage where you can drop prices significantly on robotics and then have that manufacture whatever you want, so that made in America will be significantly cheaper than made in China and shipped here. So if you get it to that stage, I think that would give the US a significant edge. But in order to do that, you need to, like this time around, you need, like, I don't think people are going to. Americans are done with political promises. In order to do that, you need to roll out universal basic income, unless you want a complete revolution, because you can't say you're building out these robots and they're going to build everything super cheap in America, but no one has a job. That's sort of the nonsensical thinking that's going on right now, is that expecting people magically to stay afloat, stay alive, get money fall from the sky, and then magically learn new skills. No, if you want them to have new skills, you're going to have to educate them. So large companies like Google and Facebook, etc., if they want to stay in the game, are going to have to dole out a significant chunk of their revenue to bringing, they're going to have to change the hiring practices significantly in order to make a sort of onboarding process so that people who are clearly not suited to jobs are trained so that over the course of a year they are suited to that job. So a very different and futuristic and humane hiring process. So that's one, and then in doing so, I explained like this is how the new form of education will work: is that where companies themselves educate on the skills that are required, but at the same time, there needs to be non-lateral, there needs to be lateral thinking, because if it's only up to corporations and everyone is thinking the same way, and you don't have outside-the-box thinking, or it's too hard. So in addition to UBI, you need to support external research. There needs to be a lot more of that in the US. I mean, that's the only way they'll maintain their military edge as well, is if they have a populace that really feels that this is the best country in the world, that the US is living up to its promise, and that the politicians are actually delivering on what they were voted in to do, which at the moment, the last 10, 20 years has not been that case. It's just gotten progressively worse and worse. Every government, whether red or blue, just is worse and then worse and then worse and then worse and then worse. So hopefully it's headed towards a sigmoidal change. Hopefully we're hitting a paradigm shift in US politics, but let's see.
It's just that nobody wants to fund pioneer models.
We empower those who act.
All right, so here we have another stupid ad.
Does China's innovation, though, come up against the headwind this year of greater restrictions on China's access to advanced semiconductor technology? Is that...
Dude, China doesn't care. It's building out research to do it on its own anyway. It has a ring model, so it's got the internal economy and external economy. And a few years ago, after the Chinese already had the strategy in place, they were just waiting for the US to act before they ramped up their internal economy. And when the US started to act out under Trump, the first Trump regime, that's when the Chinese really ramped up their focus on the internal Chinese economy in order to replace any potential need for a US economy. So yeah, they don't give a shit that much.
going to end up presenting a problem?
So we can look at historically, right? China is able to catch up and build great engineering products while US is better at making breakthroughs. That was what I argued in AI Superpowers, and that continued to be the case.
I mean, he's being very diplomatic here. The US is better at breakthroughs. I mean, it was the case.
The GPU sanctions came 2 years ago, and today we actually see DeepSeek not only resilient, competitive, but also basically made true the statement that necessity is the mother of innovation.
This is something that I also predicted back in the day, that by putting this blockade on China, you're actually doing them a favor because you're forcing them to innovate. And once they start to realize that, oh, holy crap, we can innovate, then that whole facade, that whole like story of, you know, the America is where innovation happens, where the creative people, like that sort of just, that illusion is broken, and then they're just going to go gangbusters on innovation.
That because they had so few GPUs, they had to make it 10 times more effective. So I think I would argue that the sanctions so far hasn't worked. It's hard to project the future, but
the opposite of hasn't worked. It's completely backfired.
I would say that DeepSeek actually benefited.
Instead of sanctioning that, there should have been sanctions. There should have been sanctions a long time ago, but it's too late for that. I mean, who knows? Maybe now's the time, but there's a lot that needs to happen. I mean, you can't bring in your competitors' workforce and educational force, educate them, teach them all the secret sauces, and then say, okay, go back. Or, you know, equally bad, replace your local workers with, you know, foreign cheaper labor. So it's not cheap. They get paid a good salaries, which is why they're here, but it's cheaper than you would have paid Americans, and you don't want to invest in American education. So it's just like America's system is so nonsensical at this moment. I don't understand it.
Benefited from having less resources and able to make training and inference at 5 to 10 times lower the expense incurred by OpenAI and others.
I remember, so DeepSeek was, what date is it? March 20. So let's call it 2 months ago. I remember we had the chat on the show, I think it was back in October, where you guys actually launched something similar months before DeepSeek. And so you guys came out, DeepSeek came out, and then since DeepSeek came out that moment, just the cadence and the frequency of all these ones coming out with their own iterations of it. I guess my question is, what do you make of the frequency? What is behind, you think, the frequency of these releases? And is DeepSeek the symptom, or is it the cause of what's going on? In other words, what can we expect from the industry this year?
I think it's still ultra competitive.
Okay.
The fact that I think China will have 3 winners, US might have 4.
DeepSeek is the result. It's not the cause. It's the it's the result of everything that China has been developing and building up of.
4 winners at the end doesn't mean dozens of others will not want to compete. So I do expect frequent releases to continue especially from the fast-moving companies. And I think the fastest-moving companies probably are XAI's Grok.
I mean, right now, open source for AI is sort of becoming like Linux, where you've got a whole bunch of distributions, like hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands of distributions, most of which are not used. But I think a lot of people are just going to agree to get behind a few and maintain them. For various reasons, especially if there's not much money involved. So, then I think people will be willing to put their work in for free.
And DeepSeek, I'd say these are the fastest. And then I think OpenAI, Alibaba, Google, and Anthropic are, of course, all making respectable moves. I listed ByteDance because they are not on the list by people, but we know how much they're spending. And I think one way you can justify spending a ton of money.
I mean, he's not mentioning SenseTime, so I'm guessing SenseTime is not in his portfolio.
On Pioneer models is because you have so many customers that when amortized over many, many customers, you can make the business case. And ByteDance has more customers and more ways to monetize than anybody, so I would make that speculation.
Yeah, I think Baidu is one of the names that...
Yeah, I mean, if they're going to do... See, this is where, like, Bloomberg Television, this is where, like, finance and finance towns, and it's so obscure. I mean, it's very misleading. So if they bring in someone like Kai-Fu Lee, they should say, hey, this is his portfolio, these are his companies, and hey, you're mentioning ByteDance. So let's just, like, Kai-Fu Lee, ByteDance. Like, what's his name? Kai-Fu Lee? Why is it not popping up? Kai-Fu Lee. Kai-Fu Lee. I mean, like, why is he talking about ByteDance a lot? There's no Byte. What? Let's see over here. Lee Kai-Fu. Okay. Huang Wenhao, co-founder of AI startup A1.AI, who joined ByteDance last year, now also reports to Wu. And the internal company system showed O1.ai was established by former Google China head Kai-Fu Lee in 2023 amid an investment spree in generative AI technology. This is what I mean. The former head of Google China. I mean, what is the U.S. doing? I don't understand what America's strategy is. Is very bizarre. It's so there seems to be some sort of connection with ByteDance, which is why he's talking it up.
I would make that speculation.
Yeah, I think Baidu is one of the names that sort of stands out to me, not on that list, and maybe you can share some reaction on that. But also government support from Beijing. Exactly how do you see that also shaping up over the coming year?
Well, we all respect and thank Baidu for really starting the transformer revolution in China. They tried to hire Jeff Hinton and ended up hiring Andrew Ng. And I think that shows.
Andrew Ng. All right, we have.
Have you heard of carparts.com? Check this out.
Okay. Yeah, these YouTube ads are really interfering. Like, even on my Apple TV, it's such a pain. Whoa. Okay.
Launched an enterprise large language model that's also going to be deploying DeepSeek more broadly. But
What?
talk us through
Why am I here? Okay.
from Beijing. Exactly how do you see that also shaping up over the coming year?
Well, we all respect and thank Baidu for really starting.
I mean, this is more of a platform to sell his ideas as opposed to a portal to help Bloomberg viewers, viewership see transparency. So maybe the assumption is that if you're a Bloomberg viewer, you've done your homework and research, so you know everything about the people coming on board, or you'll do it yourself, and all you want is a platform for them to sell. But still, I mean, yeah.
The transformer revolution in China. They tried to hire Jeff Hinton and ended up hiring Andrew Ng. And I think that shows that Robin has that kind of vision. The execution is currently lagging, and we'll see what happens. Yeah. And your other question was? Yeah.
Government support.
Government support, right. So the Chinese government...
So Andrew Ng, if you don't know, it's Andrew. And Ng, just NG, he's from Singapore. He was at Google. He was at Stanford. He was hired to do set up Google's AI infrastructure. He was hired by Baidu back in the day to do Baidu's AI infrastructure. That really got them going. And again, when they went, they saw it and they were just like, oh, hold on a second, this is just common sense. There's no magic to innovation, right? It's just one step in front of the other. You just have an infrastructure and you just keep on moving forward. That's all that there is to it.
This new big direction is called new quality productivity.
So Andrew's Coursera course is the one I did. That's how I got into chatbots. And I thought it would lead somewhere, but honestly, it was like my experience with AI, like when I took it, he was talking about all these new jobs, infinite opportunities, and I have not had any AI opportunities come my way. So I think there's a significant amount of like on the ground delusion when it comes to the US economy. And, you know, when they sort of talk about people who change careers or whatever, that's the exception, not really the rule. And they try to pick out those exceptions to justify this uniformity in the US, the increasing uniformity of the US economy. But I still don't see much in the way of opportunities in AI.
What that means is...
like for myself, at least, it's just, yeah.
Using high tech to create productivity, efficiency, and really turn all the traditional industries into more profitable, more competitive by the use of high tech, and AI is at the very core of that.
Actually, sorry, a final question for you. Sorry, because you mentioned the word
AI is at the very core of that. I mean, I don't know. It's useful, but to a certain extent, I think.
Consumption in AI was actually mentioned in Premier Li Chang's work report from the NPC, and to the point that Bell was making on,
I mean, again, keep in mind, this guy is heavily financially invested, so he wants all of you going and buying his stock. Whether it bans on or not, he doesn't care. He gets rich.
Government support. It was rare that we saw just, the CEOs of China's big tech companies in the same room as the president, for example, weeks before that. And I'm wondering, tangibly, what measures do you think we could see from the government to be able to back up, really, what really see it as very, very good optics?
Yeah, I think right now the local governments probably are the most active in trying to see, I'm City X, I'm the party secretary, mayor of City X, and this city is very strong in the following industries. How would I apply AI to create this new quality productivity in these industries that will end up helping the growth, the GDP of the city? And I think, having a single direction from the top.
And so just to give you guys some perspective, when Japan, you can read up on this, when Japan, and their YouTube videos, so you don't even have to read if you don't like to read, but when Japan started building out its high-speed network way back in the day, the West and everyone started making fun of them, like, kind of like, who do you think you are? This is a waste, like, oh my god, this is never going to help you, blah, 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 blah. Your infrastructure is not there, but they just reasoned that if we want to create these manufacturing jobs and these high-tech jobs, and then we need to create an environment, and we need to make it easy for people to commute in and out. And if we're going to have a main hub, which is Tokyo, then we need to have an infrastructure that supports this mass transport of humans, so that we can, make it easy, so that we can educate faster and things like that. So they really thought through in terms of, social innovation and social engineering. And when Japan succeeded in their high-speed rail, then people were really shocked. And then when they were actually successful at transforming that into an entire high-tech ecosystem, they didn't argue with their detractors. They just went ahead and did it. And led by example. So it's very clear that the Chinese have done their homework and were inspired by what the Japanese did as well. So you just go ahead and do it, and just ignore the detractors.
New quality productivity is very effective and invigorating to the cities, and we're seeing a lot of interest for our company and our peer companies to work more closely with these local cities.
So it just makes me a little sad to see, some of the parts of capitalism that I don't like still kind of make it through, and a little less honesty, a bit more salesmanship. But, sorry, but this was a terrible job by Bloomberg Television. No clarity at all. No challenging of, no mention of sense time. And so it was just a platform. So they were just catering to this person who they were afraid if they challenged him would not show up. So doesn't look good for Bloomberg in my eyes.